So our time for all ages today is a story for all ages, a Unitarian Universalist story, although it takes just a second to get to our part. We humans have always looked up at the stars, wondered about them, and even told stories about them. During the many thousands of years that human beings have been looking up at the stars, we've changed our understanding of what the universe looks like and how it works. More than 500 years ago, a man named Nicolaus Copernicus was born in Poland. That's a statue of him. He watched the stars and the planets carefully and used his observations to come up with a pretty unique and upsetting idea. Now, it's important to know that in Copernicus's time, most people thought that the Earth was at the center of the universe, like in this old picture here. The Earth is in the middle and everything else in the solar system moves around it. They also thought that stars were little holes in a glass ball around Earth. Copernicus thought, what if, based on my observations it seems like, what if the universe doesn't move around the Earth? What if the Earth is actually a planet circling the sun? He wrote a book about this idea, but it wasn't very popular. In fact, if he hadn't died soon after the book was published, it's possible he would have been put in jail for writing it. Now today, we know that Copernicus was right. Our planet Earth circles the sun, which is a star. It took a long, long time, hundreds of years in fact, for people to finally believe this and to stop saying that the Earth was at the center of the universe. But for hundreds of years, the belief that the universe revolved around Earth was so stuck in people's minds that it became part of religion, too. It became part of a religious belief. So when Copernicus said, "I don't think the heavens revolve around the Earth," he was speaking as a scientist. But in his time, it was hard to see the difference between the two, and the church heard him to be challenging their religion, which maintained that the Earth was at the center and not the sun. There's a word for what the church calls that. That word is heresy, the root of which means to choose. That meant that not just scientists, not just Copernicus, but anyone could get in big trouble for promoting an idea. And that idea was that the sun was at the center of the solar system. Now, believe it or not, this upsetting theory of Copernicus's intersects with the story of Unitarian Universalism. Not far away from where Copernicus watched the planets and stars, there was a land called Transylvania, where some of the first Unitarians built their churches and formed their faith, right about the same time as Copernicus was writing his book about the Earth revolving around the sun. Now, our Unitarian ancestors already knew what it was like to say and believe things that could get them into trouble. One of these things was the phrase here seen above a Transylvanian church's door, Egi az Isten, and I probably pronounced that poorly, which translates to God is one. Now, when they said God is one, they didn't mean it in sort of the ecumenical kumbaya kind of way that would sometimes mean that today. They meant that they didn't agree with a very specific Christian doctrine, which was the doctrine that Jesus was God incarnate. They were saying, when they said God is one, they were saying that Jesus was fully human instead of being part of God incarnate. Just as Unitarian Christians and many Unitarian Universalists believe today. A lot of Unitarians in Transylvania and elsewhere died because they refused to stop believing that, and they refused to stop speaking their truth. One of the villages in Transylvania, which is today a part of Romania that is ethnically Hungarian, it's an interesting historical part of the world, is a village called Auckland. Its Unitarian church, pictured here, is over 400 years old. That is a little less than 10 times as old as this church. Yes. Now, like a lot of Transylvanian Unitarian churches, this church has a wooden ceiling that is divided into deep square panels, as you can see in this picture. And most of those panels have nature painted on them, flowers or plants. But there is one very special ceiling panel. And here's a close-up of it. This ceiling panel contains a sun surrounded by circling planets. It is a diagram of the Copernican solar system. In Blessing the World, Unitarian Universalist minister Rebecca Parker writes, "Holy regard for knowledge is at the heart of our religious faith. Let us celebrate these gifts which have been woven into our religious DNA. We belong to a tradition in which religion and science have never been forced apart, have never asked each other to be silent. We, as a people, encourage one another to explore and to discover, to ask questions, and declare that revelation is not sealed and will never be sealed, and to freely follow the call, whatever its source, that connects us most deeply to the world inside of us and to the universe around us."